Hello and welcome back to another episode of Henry Weston's Old Mate, the podcast. Going back to our roots today, really, going to talk a bit of anxiety. And with me today, I've got an old university friend of mine, Luke Freer. I first met Luke in 2008, and we haven't really kept in touch since we finished uni in 2011. We've reconnected recently, and Luke's agreed to come on the podcast. I'll just run the usuals. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like this video and, of course, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on a podcast provider such as Apple, Spotify, Google, all the other ones, Amazon, we're on all of them. Follow the show, share the show around. If you've listened to enough episodes, you can give us a 5-star review. We have the Buy Me a Coffee page to make a small financial donation towards the future of the podcast, but that is not necessary if you don't want to. All the links to everything that we talk about in the show will, of course, be in the show notes on the YouTube channel and on the podcast providers. That's all the boring stuff. Let's get into some good stuff. So, Luke Freer, I've just introduced you as an old university friend. I'm going to come straight over to you, ask you how you're doing, and then I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself, really, mate. So, over to you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing okay.
Apart from having COVID.
Apart from feeling like, I got the COVID symptoms and everything. But yeah, I'm just happy to be on. And thanks for inviting me.
Oh, thank you so much. So you're based up in the Midlands, Luke. That's where me and you met. I guess we're the class of 2011. Is that right? Because we finished then, but we actually started in 2008, the older Wolverhampton University physical education degree. But based in Walsall, weren't we? The little Walsall campus. And we actually spent quite a lot of time together, probably in certainly the first 2 years, and then the sort of third year, everyone goes off in their own directions with dissertations, etc. Really, but those first 2 years, I mean, I could probably garner a few comments here. Actually, we could say if people leave 10 comments on the YouTube channel, I'll release the video. I still have the video of mine and yours year one gymnastics routine. I don't think I have the video of my dance routine, but your dance routine is still available on Facebook. I know that much. Those university years, they were quite fun, weren't they, Luke? And I remember thinking when you said you'd come on, I remember you were always a man who was quite happy to share his opinion in a good way and always had plenty to say for himself. And to me, that makes quite a good podcast guest. Yeah, so, I mean, those university years, what do you remember of them, mate, before we get into the anxiety years?
I think, like I said, I was a mature student like yourself going to university. I was told by someone that if I wanted to, go further in life, then I probably needed a degree, which I don't always agree with, but I was thinking about becoming a teacher. You can't become a teacher without a degree. Yeah. So I got on by chance because obviously I rung up the admissions team and I said I was a mature student. I like basketball, I like Arsenal, and so Mr. O'Leary loves those two things. So I'm sure you'd be absolutely fine. They let me on. And obviously I was a youth worker at the same time while I was doing that. So I didn't live the full experience of the uni life like you did. The nights out in Walsall and stuff. Obviously I commuted over 35 minutes to university and then had to work at night times because I had a flat and, and my girlfriend is my wife now. We had to obviously support that, and my Arsenal season ticket, of course, don't miss that out. But I absolutely loved that group, and I still watch sometimes the video that was made for the graduation with the music, Take a Look Around. I did actually re-put that on my YouTube page actually, because I found it. And I just thought it was a really nice group. I loved everyone in the group. Everyone sort of got on well. I think there was 45 of us at the end, 47.
Yeah, sounds about right.
I was really gutted that we didn't do so well. Last year COVID was around, and last year would have been 10 years. I was thinking about trying to organize some like 10-year anniversary reunion, which would have been really, but like yourself, we had a lot of laughs, we spent a lot of time together. I just remember sort of the first year, I think Dorothy absolutely hated me. It was the dance lecturer, 'cause she pulled me to one side and said I asked too many questions, and I was like, for $3.5 grand a year, I'll ask as many questions as I want,
I do remember a few. Dance with Dorothy. We'll get Damien Robinson on maybe one day for a chat. But I do remember some lectures where we thought we might get out a little bit early, and Mr. Freer had the odd question. And you're right, for the money we were paid for our degree, you were entitled to ask as many questions as you could. And a Dance with Dorothy, I do not miss in the side. But we had some wonderful lecturers. Obviously, Nick O'Leary was a wonderful lecture, and Jez sort of in that early year or two. And then Gav jumped on board, and people weren't convinced on Gav, but he was actually, I wasn't convinced at first, but then he was actually my dissertation tutor, lecturer, and he came into his own. Sort of, he got me through my dissertation, so I'll be forever grateful to him for that. But like you say, a wonderful group. We had, me and you weren't the only old ones, were we? We had sort of Pete Shearer, who must have been plus 40 at the start of it, and Rich and Hannah Goddard.
Hannah was my she got me in A in gymnastics because she was so good at gymnastics, and she managed to do a flip, which basically automatically got you a certain score. But yeah, I think it was, and then there was Claire, I think, and that was that we were like, there was about 6 of us that were like over the age of like 21. And ironically, if she's still there, my daughter's secondary school, Amy, she's Amy Bromley now, but Amy Perrow's the PE teacher there. So my daughter's
just had a second child, I think, hasn't she?
Yeah,
I think we're still friends on
yeah,
Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, they were good years, weren't they? Let's move forward to, I mean, we're still good years now. You're a married man. You've got a wonderful family and a successful sort of career since leaving uni. But you've come on because I approached you. You did a little community-based podcast based on your sort of previous job. I know you've recently switched jobs, and I sort of messaged you and said, come on my podcast and tell us a bit about community sport, etc. And you said, well, I've kind of just left community sport. So that you said, but what I do know and have researched through personal experience is sort of anxiety. And anxiety is something that I think, in all honesty, I've always struggled with. In active addiction, it was certainly obviously at its peak when I was sort of mixing alcohol with anxiety and probably some periods of depression as well. But you were very honest with me, and you said, I think you mentioned it was probably when your second child, I might be wrong, but when one of your children came along, you really struggled, and you actually diagnosed sort of by the doctor with anxiety. So just sort of give us a brief overview of that period in your life, Luke, and how building up to the time you actually went to see the doctor and he was able to help you and explain to you what was going on.
Yeah, so I think to start with, a bit like you, I probably have always had anxiety, but everyone's got it to some extent. It's a natural thing, flight or fight. It's been around since the caveman days. But when my second child was born, which was 2015, it was around 2016 that it was around May of 2016, and I was getting like really bad like stomach pains.
Okay.
I was waking up in the morning with like really bad stomach pains.
Okay.
And then it became a really bad vicious cycle where I was waking up with the thought, oh, am I going to wake up with a bad stomach? Do you know what I mean? So it became a really bad cycle. And I basically went to the doctor for some tests, and then I did the worst thing that you could do, start Googling symptoms. And
oh Christ, you had everything.
I mean, you can say that you've got a runny nose and convince yourself that you've got cancer and you're going to die next week.
Yeah.
But because, and I think it's worth saying that I've always kept myself busy. I'm always a busy person. I always like to help people. And I do a lot now. I run a charity outside of work, doing youth work still. I coach 2 basketball teams, a National League team, a local, got my Arsenal season. I'm chairman of the West Midlands for Basketball England, and I've got a full-time job and 2 children and a wife. So I've got a lot of things going on. I've always done that. But I think that when my second child was born, I obviously, it started to release fears in me, and that's what anxiety does. It eats away at your insecurities, your fears that you've got. And I just got myself in such a bad state to the point where I remember I was listening to sad music driving to work, planning my funeral, I've got a guy I work with quite closely called Theo Thompson, who does all videos and music and stuff like that. He's a wicked guy from North Solihull. And I remember in my head thinking, right, I'm gonna have to get Theo to do me a video for my daughter's 16th, my daughter's 21st, my daughter's when they get married, because I'm not going to be around.
So you thought we're not talking about you sort of thinking of ending your own life here. You thought you were poorly. You convinced yourself that something was drastically wrong with you, and you were going to pop off and leave everyone behind.
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference with anxiety is a fear of letting people down, or the worry that something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas depression sometimes is you have a low self-worth of yourself, and you feel so low that you just don't feel great about yourself, and you don't value yourself. That's different. I know I do value myself, and I know that I have got certain skills. I know what my weaknesses are, and I know what my strengths are. I know I'm not amazing academically, but I know that I'm quite creative. I'm good with people, and I'm quite good at knowing what people want, and I'm quite good in all different situations. But this spiraled out of control, and I had some tests done. Then I went back again, and the doctor was like, right, your mum's got, he was brilliant, Dr. Ladd. He's still my doctor now. He's so good. And he basically said to me, like, I can only describe, like, I was in just like a blurb across my head. Like, I wasn't in the moment, which anxiety is all about, but I wasn't in the moment for probably 3 years from that point, right? I was all over the place. And I remember we were buying our first house, which we're in now, moving around the corner. But I just remember going to the doctor, and I remember the doctor saying to me, right, no, there's nothing wrong with blood tests. And I found out I got Mediterranean blood plates and stuff, and he asked me where I was from. And then the second time I went back again about 3 weeks later, and then he was like, look, we'll test you for colitis, because my mum's got ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. No, absolutely fine. And then I remember, I never forget it. I was really dizzy, because I was having these dizzy spells as well, and I was supposed to go to my Friday night football session that I do with the youths in Redditch. And I remember ringing the doctor. Luckily, I had an appointment. I went to a doctor, and he just looked at me and he said, "Luke, you're a very anxious person for a 33-year-old, I think I was at the time."
Yeah. And
he said, "You're very, very anxious. You seem very like on edge." And I was like, really taken back by it. And luckily, because my old job, we were still within Coventry City Council at the time. Our active partnership was hosted by that. I managed to get some therapy, like counselling sessions for six sessions before my NHS ones came through. And he said, I'm going to refer you to, he says, you've got health anxiety, blah, blah, blah. And then later on got diagnosed with generalised anxiety disorder. And like catastrophizing things and stuff, and just like, it was a really bad point in my life, because I wanted to be there for my family and wanted to be around, but at the same time I kept having this fear that I was going to die basically, and the worst things were going to happen. And then obviously from then, once you've seen something, you can't stop seeing it. So once I knew I had anxiety and I had it, it became really, but what I tried to do, like you said to me off the podcast and certain things, is I'm very grateful that I've played sport, and obviously I've played basketball for 28 years now, and I'm very disciplined, training, doing drills, all that sort of stuff. And I saw the counselling and stuff, like the training and the drills, and I tried to learn as much about anxiety as possible. And I think probably 2 years ago, there were points where I was like, oh my God, my wife's going to look at me differently and see me like as a different person that she married, and I'm not the same, and I'm not, but I've really embraced it, and I've accepted the fact that I have anxiety now, and I try really hard with different coping mechanisms and all that sort of stuff. But listen, I totally understand why people go to drink. I understand why people do drugs. I understand why people, I mean, my big thing, which, looking back, I've always been an eater. I always like emotional eating, but because I played so much basketball, I always used to be like 10 stone wringing wet. And I played 4 or 5 times a week. I played football as well. And even when I was at uni, I thought I was big at uni, but at uni I was only like 11.5 stone. I killed a bit now. I'm now 15.5 stone, and I still play basketball, but just this cycle. I get injured, then I get annoyed because I can't play basketball. And that's why when lockdown happened, I've got to admit, for the first couple of months, I loved it, because I was saying to people, even on calls, welcome to my world. You know, imagine waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, am I going to die today? Is this going to happen? Is this going to? So for me, I wasn't nervous about COVID, because I'm used to that every day. So everyone got brought into my world for a year, you know what I mean? And people that weren't anxious were experiencing it. And I think, but what became difficult is the things that I love doing, the three things: the PlayStation, going to Arsenal, and playing basketball. The three things that have me in the moment. PlayStation's not really doing it for me anymore now. Maybe that's because I'm getting older, I'm getting bored of FIFA, etc. Arsenal, I have pure worries when I go to Arsenal now about my kids. Like, oh, are they okay? Are they okay? Something going to happen to them. So I don't enjoy that much. Basketball is the only thing still that when I'm there, I'm not on mobiles. I'm in the moment playing the game. But because I'm older and I don't look after my body properly, I'll get injuries a lot more now. So then I can't play as much, and I play. So it's like a vicious cycle. So that's sort of where I'm at to the point now.
Wow. I mean, yeah, and it sounds very similar to myself. And I've said to you off air, and I said to sort of in other podcasts, that in active addiction, when my anxiety was sort of ramped up to the max, and I didn't sort of have this. I didn't see the worst or see things happening bad to me, because I think I had given up on myself to the point, but I still wanted to be around. I've said many times I wasn't doing a very good job of hanging around, but I didn't want to not be here. But I'd given up on myself. But whenever my wife or my daughter, if they went anywhere, I had those thoughts that you've just described. If they went anywhere in the car, or I remember they flew to Switzerland once to see some friends of my wife's, and I was convinced the plane was going to crash. And every time, my wife has family in Essex, so she's regularly up the sort of motorway. And every time she was up the motorway, I was convinced the car was going to crash into a lorry, or something drastically bad was going to happen. And I couldn't shake it. And like yourself, even in between sort of my sips of extra strong cider, I'd be on the internet trying to come up with ways of sort of coping with what I knew was, I didn't know it as anxiety, but I knew it wasn't normal behavior. I knew I was overreacting and overthinking things. So I do some research, but in a way, for me, that just made it worse. Yeah. But can I ask, so you went to see the doctor and he diagnosed you with sort of generalized anxiety disorder. We'll put a link in the sort of show notes to go deeper in, if anyone wants to have a deeper read into that. So the doctor, he got you these sessions. Did you go down any form of medication, Luke? No.
So because of my job, physical activity and sport, my whole thing is that physical activity is the best drug. The chief medical officer, if they could prescribe any drug, it would be physical activity. Yeah. The problem is that people are not in a position mentally to, when I'm doing, like I said, my previous role, when we're trying to get the most inactive active, well, actually, you need to make them feel good first before they start thinking about being active. But to make them feel good, they need to be. So it's a difficult. But basically, I was really lucky because I managed to get 6 sessions with a lady around counselling. And what she did which was insane, and it really made me start being like, wow. She started to draw my life. She asked me where I was at. This is before I got the IAP services from the NHS. And she just started to talk to me about my anxiety and where it comes from and certain things, which over the years I've sort of understood more and more, a bit about my upbringing. Nothing my mum, it's not my mum's fault, nothing like that. But obviously I don't see my real dad as, I stopped seeing him when I was 4, and and my mum's always like looked after me and stuff. But I think there's certain things that when I was younger, like superstition, crossing the stairs, all those sort of things. Like when I went to secondary school, it was like a massive breakdown because you have to cross the stairs of people daily. And when I look back now, I think, God, that was really difficult for me to do that. And even little things, when I used to ask my friends to stay over at my mum's, I used to cross my finger and put it behind my back and count to 23, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 23, and ask, I used to do these over the top things.
Yeah.
But basically, this lady helped me understand sort of me, where things come from, etc. And basically, you know, I don't know if my mum has a bit of anxiety, and my mum ever listens to this. Like, you know, I hope you understand where I'm coming from. But I'm probably a lot like my mum. Like, the littlest things could maybe make me irate. So I always say about my mum, right? My mum, if I didn't clean the side down properly, my mum would be really annoyed, right? No, my mum's not abusive or anything like that, but she'd just be annoyed with me.
Yeah.
And if I came back at 14 and said to my mum, I've got 2 girls pregnant, my mum would have been absolutely the calmest person in the world about it. And I suppose I'm a bit like that now with my children. I'm exactly the same, like in terms of like, you know, that my anxiety myself. I don't know if anxiety is hereditary, but I had those sessions, and then obviously you're not allowed to have 2 counselling sessions at the same time.
No,
so
of course, yeah.
When and I've got to be honest with you, that lady was amazing. I mean, I brought a massive bouquet of flowers, and when I gave them to, she was so good with me and made me understand lots of different things. And it's amazing when you're finding out things about yourself and you think, oh wow, I didn't realize that's because of that. And one of my really close friends, my best friends, is really struggling at the minute. And you know, his is for different reasons, medical reasons. He had a really bad injury, brain injury, but he and obviously with a brain hemorrhage things happen, but he's now going down that route, and he's finding things out. And it's amazing how, you know, everyone will have things that make them tick. That's not what I'm doing with my children now. I'm trying my best to be the best that I can, but I am probably doing things to them, or there's things that might later on in life, it just happens. But so I had that counselling, and then, I mean, to be fair, the doctor did say I could go on medication straight away, but I'm really anti that. And that's not anyone who's on a medication. It's, you know, I'm not saying no, but I just felt like once I go down that route, you know, unless I'm really on the floor and I can't get out of bed, then I didn't want to go on any medication. And then I basically had the IAP services, which was cognitive behavior therapy.
Yeah, CBT.
About living in the moment. And I got to be honest with you, like the things that I got out of it was the worry tree, right?
Okay. So just talk us through a worry tree then, Luke.
So a worry tree is basically, you start at the bottom or at the top, whichever way around it would be, and it has lots of paths that go off it, and there'd be questions on there like, you know, is something bad going to happen if you don't do this? And then it goes, what do you choose, yes or no? And it gives you a thing. But basically what it does is it makes you realize actually worrying, like anger. I always remember my dad said to me once when one of my girlfriends sort of cheated on me when I was at college, and he was really angry, and he said, Luke, there's 2 emotions in life that are pointless: anger and jealousy. The quicker you get around that, the more you'll be able to control. And I almost feel like worry is one of those things. Worry can be good, worrying I'm not working hard enough on the basketball court for my team defensively and that sort of stuff. But that worry, that feel, you know, I always say, before you're about to take off on a plane, right, every single person in the world, I don't care who they are, even if they're, you know, air stewards. You know, my brother's just started today as an air steward, bless him, his first job doing that. You have that feeling in your stomach 100%, right? Imagine having that almost 24/7, like, and when you're in flight or fight, right, this is what this counselor said to me. She said, Luke, your mind, you run a marathon every day in your mind. And probably going back to knowing me, and you obviously at university, you probably realize that my mind was all over the place, and I used to jump from thing to thing to thing, you know, and that's some of it. I found out I'm dyslexic. I got mild dyslexia. I've only found that out this year, right? Well, that's probably why with my words sometimes I mix them up. But my mind is so active, you know what I mean? And it is like running a marathon. It's you know, and that's where the link with depression is as well. Like, you know, it can, when you got depression, as you know, it can be so tiring with what's going on in your head, and it's similar to anxiety. So I did the cognitive behavior therapy. We did the worry tree, which I really liked, and, you know, understanding. And actually, I made the bold jump. It was either this season or the season before. When I go to Arsenal, and I've done it for 15 years, I always go up the same set of stairs and put my arm on. I have to touch the railing, and I don't know why. It didn't really brought us any luck.
I was going to say, I was going to avoid Arsenal jokes, but it hasn't done you much good in the last.
No, it hasn't.
Years.
No. So now, I think it was just before COVID, I just gave that up. And
well done.
And it was hard, but it was essential. And I just think about little things where, when I was younger, you know, like, if you walked over 3 drains, I used to say to you that was bad luck, and you have to go back and spit on them, otherwise it's bad luck. Like, all these things that mean
that must
nothing.
be a Midlands thing.
No, I think it was my when I was in Sussex growing up at school there.
Oh,
But basically, all these things I try to avoid now, and I try to not, and the cognitive behavior therapy in terms of like training the brain. The lady I had the first time around, because I've had three lots of it. First one, she was really nice, although she did look identical to one of my wife's really close friends, so I found that difficult. But she was
there's
really
another podcast.
yeah. She was really nice, and she helped me a lot and told me everything around, the cognitive behavior therapy, in terms of retraining your brain, trying to take your mind off things, live in the moment. And obviously I've learned loads about it. And I look at my wife, and me and my wife are polar opposites in terms of what we're like. My wife is, if she's awake for 16 hours, she's living in the moment for 15 hours and 55 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, she is amazing when it comes to living in the moment. Even with worry, we've had some stuff with her dad recently and stuff. She just deals with facts. She doesn't, and that's not.
She doesn't project. Then she doesn't project that.
No, and she's probably good for me in that respect because of that. But what I say is that, like, mental health is like a phone, and to charge your phone up fully, you need to be in the moment.
Yeah.
So when I talked to you earlier about basketball, PlayStation, when I was doing those things, when I'm on the PlayStation, I used to be fully in the moment on that PlayStation. My brain wasn't thinking about other things. When I'm at Arsenal, I used to just be focusing on the football and what's going on. I wasn't thinking. When I'm at basketball, it's the same thing. I'm in the moment, living it. And I think that because I played so much basketball at a young age and I did so much sport, it probably stopped anxiety creeping in at a young age. So I was almost self-regulating myself without even knowing it, because I just played sport all the time.
Yeah.
But I find it really hard to live in the moment. So, like, when lockdown came, I did find it hard to just sit and watch TV. And I think part of it's society as well now. But I can't really watch anything unless I've got a phone in my hand or doing certain things. And I do find it really, like, now having this conversation, I am fully in the moment, which is nice. It makes me feel better about myself. But I'm fully in the moment. Now, that's something I've really tried to work on. And I think cognitive behavior therapy, if I'm totally honest with you, I think it is a really good skill to try and master. They did talk about medication, but that first lady, meditation, sorry.
Yeah.
That first lady that I met, the counselor, was amazing. She was just honest with me. She was like, Luke, your mind is so active. I don't think meditation will work. Like, she was really honest with me about it.
Yeah.
And she was saying the reason you're so tired is because you run a marathon every day and all these sort of things. And I suppose there is some parts of it where you start to become okay with things. But I think the biggest thing now I struggle with still, I still get anxiety. And what I've really noticed massively over the last 6 months, and again, some people might say, oh, well, why do you not realize that anyway? Sleep is huge, right?
Sleep and plenty of water will get you a long way in life.
Sleep, water, right? Or not having sugar, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
I love sugar. Like, that's my thing. I always say there's drinking, smoking, drugs, eating, right? And not doing exercise. There's 5 things there. Like, and when I'm working with youth and talking, you can do maybe 1, maybe 2. But the minute you start trying to do 3 or 4, 5, it's game over type thing in terms of your life. And I'm still quite active, but again, because of having children, and both people, me and my wife both work, and my old job used to be really flexible, but if I did exercise, I had to make the hours up, which was fine. But then when you got kids, and I'm coaching and taking the kids everywhere, I just feel like I don't have any time for myself. You know what I mean? I know you said that we haven't really connected really since 2011, but if I'm honest with you, my only friends I really see are the ones that I play sport with. My real good friends that I went college with, not closest friends, I hardly see them. I've probably seen them about 5 times since finished uni. I talk to them, message them.
Yeah, I think that's life, isn't it? I had 2 or 3 very good friends, and both my brothers and I don't see my best friend. He lives 40 miles away, and we probably see each other 4 times a year at most. My other good friend who's away with the army quite a lot, we connect when he's home, but when he's home, he might be home, say 5 or 6 weekends in the summer. I'll only see him 1 or 2. I think that's life to a point. That's growing up. Well, not growing up.
Stuart, that's where I feel like the Peter Pan thing. Like, you don't realize that when you used to be with your mates, just having a laugh and a joke, how much that helped you be in the moment, not take life too seriously. and not have the stresses of things like, you know, I'm losing my hair now, you know, I'm overweight, all these sort of things, my joints are hurting. But I don't just, even all my friends in the same boat, we're all in the same boat as what you're saying. They've all got kids and all got things going on, you know, and I think, you know, one of the things is I just almost think I want to be so financially stable to support my children. But I think the thing is that when you have anxiety, and like I said to you, I thought about doing my own sort of anxiety diaries, maybe just once a week or something, just letting people know what goes through your head.
Yeah.
And I've got a friend who got you know, he nearly died last year, and he's been in not a great place, and he I've known him for years. He's been like a mentor to me. And when I started explaining to him that I understand what catastrophic thoughts are, you know, those thoughts you said about going down the motorway or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, my wife can take the kids to the park, and my kids could be playing upstairs, and I could think one of them's fallen off and banged their head. Like I have these thoughts daily, but I'm so used to them. But they do become very, very stressful. And sometimes I do feel like I'm fighting against it, and I almost do not allow my anxiety to take over. But when I mentioned to my friend about the thoughts that I have, and so he was like, "Oh my God, that's how I feel." And that's why I thought, like, sometimes it's just to let people know about those thoughts. And I always make a bit of a thing. I don't meet someone straight away and say, "I'm Luke, I have anxiety." I don't say that. But if I'm in certain meetings, or even my new job, I do tell people, "Yeah, I've got anxiety." Because the way I look at things is that, like, if you had tennis elbow, you wouldn't have an issue telling people.
No.
You wouldn't. You say, "I've got tennis elbow," and everyone be like, "Oh, what's your arm? This and this." And I think, I mean, one of the things I think needs to change is it needs to be changed to mind health instead of mental health, because there's some stigmas there itself, and I'm pretty certain that will change over time. But I think that the way that you look at things is like, you know, if you had a broken leg, you wouldn't say to someone, "Run across the street," because you can see physically what's wrong with them, you know. And I think that, like, you know, my anxiety, I think, just going back to my friend who was really, you know, was really in a bad way, he explained some stuff to me, and explained some things about, you know, detachment disorder and these sort of things. And I think the thing that the conclusion I've come to is, from a young age, I lost a lot of things, you know. I moved around a lot, London, Kent, Sussex, you know. I stopped seeing my real dad. I stopped seeing all of his family. Although I don't really remember it that well, it would have been, you know, when we go back to child development module where we get the big circles out, you know.
Definitely a trigger in there, wouldn't there? Yeah.
Where I stopped seeing, you know, parts of my own family, my cousins. My nan died. My nan died, who I was really close with. My granddad died, who I was really close with. You know, then we moved from Sussex up to Burton-on-Trent when I was 15. You know, just certain things that used to happen that probably made me realize about, like, where some of my anxieties come from. But then that puts anxiety on me now as a 37-year-old, where I'm scared to even say to my wife, "Look, let's move back to London," because I don't want to move my kids out of school, because I've now got anxiety, so it's gonna, you know, so it can be quite difficult. But I think that that's where I've had things taken away from me, and I think that is my ultimate sort of fear, is my children, something happening to my children. That is my ultimate fear. And I think, like, you know, I have all those thoughts when they go to the park about them climbing on things and all that, and doing, like, things are going to fall down, snap their neck and stuff. But I'm like, I stop myself from doing things. I am a bit funny on certain things, like, be careful with safety, but I've always been like that with teaching and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, I don't have catastrophic thoughts about myself. Like, it's always about my wife. She goes on way with her mate. You know what I mean?
I was exactly the same. And I was just going to ask you that. It sounds to me, because with my anxiety, and it's I manage it quite well now, and certainly sort of in sobriety, you know, coming up for 4.5 years sober, and sort of, I would say 2.5 years of the last 2.5 years I've been really working on myself. And my anxiety, I'll have periods of possibly weeks where it really doesn't show at all. And like you, I'm with my daughter. I'm probably a bit too much. "Oh, watch what you're doing. Don't bang yourself there." But it sounds to me, like you battle it on a daily basis, almost all the time, you're saying. And mine seems slightly different. How do you cope with that? You sort of said you just, Do you just accept it and just try and be stubborn and put it to the back of your mind? Because it seems to me, even on this podcast now, your brain is going at 100 mile an hour. How do you sort of reconcile some of those thoughts in you? Because you must have come up with a way, because otherwise you just lock yourself in the cupboard. But I mean, I don't have these daily thoughts. I'll have periods of good weeks where I'm 100%, but it seems to me like yours appears to be still quite a daily battle.
It's funny because I found that doing manual tasks, cleaning the garage out, sorting out the garden, those things I love, because I'm so engrossed in the moment.
Yeah.
I feel so good after it. And I think all this thing around being on computers, I mean, lockdown was unbelievable because, I was having like 7 meetings a day. It was ridiculous, and you're just sitting there and, and even before I came on this, I was anxious, not about doing the podcast, about have I got the link right? Am I going to be there on time? And sometimes I'm like that with, and I'm trying to learn to sort of let things go a little bit. Even with my new job, I get worried what people, again, that worry thing, getting worried that people think I'm not working hard enough or I'm not doing the right number of hours, where I'm like, no. This is your life. This is your work. And I'm pushing back quite a lot. It is a fight, like you say. I think the things that I try and do when I'm on a run of things, I mean, I was at lockdown, it was terrible. I was eating like 2 bags of those chocolate, like 12s, whatever, a day, just polishing off like they're crisps, like thinking it's all fine, and then wondering why I'm waking up with bad stomach, my anxiety, like I've got a headache. So what I have noticed is if I can try and eat better, but again, it's a vicious cycle. When you're busy, you quickly grab some rubbish food and you do, but I try and eat better. I'd like to say I drink more water. I don't. I do intermittent fasting.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I don't do that for because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to lose loads of weight. I'm going to look like Zac Efron in Baywatch. Like I'm not doing that. I do it because I listened to a podcast on Joe Rogan, and there was a guy on there about making you live longer, and he talked about your insides and how your body needs a rest, and every time you put a calorie in, you're starting your engine up. Okay. So from when I wake up in the morning to 12 o'clock, I only have hot water or hot water with a lemon. So I don't really drink tea anymore. That's another thing that used to be one of my pleasures, is drinking tea, but I pile it with sugar, which is no. So I've gone away from some of those things, and I don't know how much of an effect it's had on me. But all as I would say is when I do eat in the mornings now, like when I've been on holiday, I break it for certain things. I do feel very heavy, and my mind starts overworking, and I think that I'm not amazing at it, but I try really hard to I try to block things out, or just, so the minute things start coming into my head, because they still do, I'm never going to be able to stop it. I know I will never ever, I had this conversation with my sister-in-law, I know to the day I die, I will never go back to not worrying that I've got, not thinking that I have anxiety each day. It won't happen. And the problem with mental health is, the minute you start to get that good stretch where you think, wow, I'm flying here, your body doesn't like it. It tells you, like, no, this isn't right. You need to be in state of anxiety and fear to feel like you're normal. But the problem is, when you're in that flight or fight, that's when you can get ill, because your immune system isn't working, because that's what it does. It shuts everything in. That's when you start eating rubbish. All those type of things happen when you're in that situation. So I try really hard to stop myself. I mean, I was quite proud on holiday because my wife, my father-in-law's been he's had cancer 3 times. He was a black cab driver in London for a long time. He's brilliant. I've got a lot of similarities with him. My father-in-law's not been that well recently, and my mum's constantly in hospital all the time. And I try really hard to block those things out. Like I try really hard, and I would say I'm a little bit better at doing it with outside my immediate family. But when I was on holiday, my wife said to me, "Oh, my back's hurting a little bit," But my brother-in-law is like a physiotherapist. He specializes in backs. And she said, "Oh, I need to get my brother to check it out because I've got this aching pain." And straight away, the first thing that comes into my mind, she's got bone cancer in her back. Right? That's the first
I shouldn't
thing.
laugh, but I understand exactly. Yeah.
That's the best thing to do. So I try and laugh about it now, and like, what's his name? And I tried hard to say, no, just switch off. She will look after herself, and then eventually the pain's gone. But But what I haven't sort of mentioned is, do you know how many things I've been through with anxiety, like pains, pins and needles?
I was going to say, talk us through, because I mean, with me, I mean, anyone watching this YouTube video, I've been laid up with a bust ankle since last Monday. So I haven't been running, and I have to be honest, I haven't been eating particularly well. So if anyone looks at me on this YouTube video, you'll notice pimples all over my face. And I know that's a sign when my anxiety is playing up a little bit, not huge, because I'm inactive. Since lockdown 1, I've been running 3, 4, 5, 6 times a week, and I've been running not to lose weight, really, because I haven't lost weight. I've been running to manage my mental health, and it's been pretty good. But one of my physical triggers is, it's not acne, it's just spots across my face, and I know they'll be across my back. But talk to us a little bit about some of yours. You're just going to mention some of the sort of physical symptoms.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I get injured running, but I don't mind running. But then I get myself in such a state about going for a run. Is things going to rub? Have I got the right clothes on? Are my legs going to hurt? Like instead of just going and just doing it, just do it.
Just get out there.
And that's another thing about anxiety. Little tasks, like at work, a little email that needs doing that takes about 2 minutes. I will just leave it, let it get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it becomes overwhelming. I mean, I won't take my top off, but see that Zac Efron stomach. But I have got I get a stress rash across here, red rash across here, all blotches.
Yeah.
I mean, during lockdown, I had a crazy. I basically, when I lay down to go to bed, again, this is crazy. I literally was going to the toilet like 20 times before I was going to bed. And I had this like pain here, and I was like, what? And I tried really hard to ignore it. Like, no, just leave it. It's anxiety. But I just couldn't. So I only went to the doctors twice in 2 years in the lockdown, which was, and I went in, and basically, it's anxiety. That's all it was. Yeah. I had a urine sample, just vitamin D. I've got a lymphoma on my back, and again, I managed that quite well. When you think that's a lump, you can visibly see.
Yeah,
I was quite relaxed about that, because I only ever go on the NHS now. It's not a hard lump, this and this, blah blah blah, and it has got bigger now. Lymphomas, they're not linked to diet and fat, but once you've got them, and if you put weight on, the lymphoma gets big. So I'm having that removed because it's right on the corner. When I'm moving, it becomes a bit. But
so that's a fatty lump, is it, Luke?
Yeah. I can allow myself to think all sorts of things about that. But so in terms of physical symptoms, dizziness was huge, right?
Okay.
It's almost like anxiety is like throwing the book at me at the minute. So I went with stomach pains. Which I still get stomach pains, like real inflated bloatedness and what's name, even if I haven't eaten. It's just so stomach pains, dizziness, headaches, obviously the flight or flight feelings. I've had pains in different areas, pins and needles in my feet, hands, obviously, constantly needing to wee. I've been close to being sick a few times with things. I get that real hot feeling, like you've just been told something really bad is going to happen. The only thing I haven't had, and I think I've been close to, I have got so overwhelmed, and I think even just going back to uni, the only time I had that, I remember I was doing it was the politics in physical education.
Not my favourite module.
No, it was interesting, but it was. And I remember one day I just said to my wife, "Right, I'm going to bed. I'm quitting uni. I'm just," because it became so overwhelming. Anger, I would say snappiness. And that's one thing that I'm really conscious of. I don't want my children to have anxiety. I don't want them to, be worried about things. Although I think a lot of kids are worried now, and that's probably society. And that's for another episode in terms of, social media and things that go on, what people are exposed to. And I think that I've never had a panic attack. Again, here goes my anxiety, touch wood. Not that does anything in the world, but I have to do it because of my worry. There's certain things I still can't get rid of.
This is anxiety live almost, isn't it? It's fantastic. Exactly. It's not fantastic.
But it's just you're seeing what it's like, and I think this is things that people don't realize, that when you're at work and things that happen, and just even I can't be very spontaneous anymore. Maybe because I've got kids, but spontaneous. And even my wife has to tell me about things or plan how she tells me things, because she doesn't want me to get annoyed and when I get annoyed, it's just straight away you put a barrier up. No, we can't do that. Oh, I'm going to lose all my holiday. I'm going to have no holiday. You know what I mean? And that is another form of how it comes out. But I try really hard to live in the moment. But the really sad thing is, and looking back on nights out with people and things, when I used to get drunk, didn't care about what was going on, because you're drunk. You lose all your inhibitions or whatever. But when I used to go out with my wife, or was out with friends or whatever, I couldn't relax until I got back through the door.
Yeah.
I couldn't enjoy being in that moment until I'd got home. And I think, like, holidays are a bit different because I can relax when the plane lands. And again, all those things go through my head. My daughter's going to get sucked out the window. The door's going to open mid-flight. My daughter's gone to the toilet. Someone's going to open the door. All these things. If I wrote them all down, people would think I'm crazy, like what goes on in my head. But there's a lot of people living with those thoughts every day. It's when those thoughts become too much that people. Now, I don't know if I didn't have a wife and 2 kids, whether now being diagnosed with it at 30, like I would struggle to have a relationship again. I don't know whether, I'd be that anxious about meeting someone, and when I met with them, I'd be catastrophizing things. I don't know. But what I feel like is I've got the book of anxiety, that once I've had one of these symptoms, I can genuinely tell whether it's anxiety or not, you know. And I've had my friend who I said he said he had a pain going down the back of his leg that was like horrendous, had all scans, everything done. And that was trauma enforced because of, their brain injury had or whatever. And it's amazing what the mind can do. The mind is so powerful. And that's why if you can train the mind. Now, what doesn't help is TV all the time. I've got to be honest with you, I don't watch the TV and think, oh my God, we're going to be in a war and we're going to end up. A few thoughts go through my head, but avoiding negative stuff is really important. I think just trying to see the positive in everything instead of the negative is a difficult thing. And I think, like, even to the point like Arsenal wasn't becoming enjoyable because I loved Arsene Wenger that much. I wanted Arsenal to win for him.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean? Not because of me. And
I don't understand. I never wanted Arsenal to win.
No, well, there you go. I know you wouldn't. But like it stops becoming enjoyable on certain things. And I just think trying to see the positives in things as much as possible, accepting you're going to have dips. It's never going to be plain sailing.
Yeah. I mean, that's wonderful advice, isn't it? And I mean, that is, if anyone listening to this is thinks they may struggle or do struggle, that's probably one of the first things a doctor or even your mum and dad would tell you as a youngster growing up, when it probably wasn't anxiety, but as you were growing up and you were starting to realize the world isn't quite as nice as perhaps you thought it was. Your mum and dad would say to you, try not to worry about too much, and there's going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. As we get older, and myself and yourself, we are aware of, we struggle with this thing called anxiety. If you can get to the point where you are going to have periods within sort of between that period of a year between Christmas and the next Christmas, those 12 months, you're going to have periods where things aren't so good. But if you're able to understand why, and you're not going to sail plain sailing through those bad points, they're going to be really bad, some of them, sadly. But like you're saying there, Luke, if you can, and fortunately you're married, I'm married. My wife is able to look at me now, and she even if I've not said something, she say, "You're doing it," or she'll look at me and say, "Stop worrying about whatever you're worrying about." An example for me is something that you just said, and it really picked up or triggered something in me, Luke. When you went out for a night out, you weren't able to relax until you got back. If we plan a lovely family meal, I will, if I'm not doing particularly well, I'll worry about the cost of it before we get to the restaurant. And we're not poor, we're not wealthy, but we're not poor. We can afford meals out. I will then, if I'm really bad, during the meal, I will then worry about how many drinks everyone's ordering. And I might not order a drink myself because I think, well, that'll save £3 on the bill. And I actually don't enjoy sometimes I won't actually enjoy being out for the meal. Once the bill's paid, I relax a little bit, but then I won't actually be back to myself till I've got home. And I think that's almost a comfort factor, isn't it? That safety blanket of locking yourself behind your front door.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I mean, you touched on it sort of a few minutes ago, Luke, about, you've started a new job and you won't necessarily introduce yourself as, hi, I'm Luke and I struggle with anxiety, or I have anxiety. We don't want to suggest that it's always a struggle, but it generally is. Is it fair to ask you how, I mean, my experience, if I say to you, my experience in the workplace with my anxiety, my experience in the workplace has always been that my employers have been very good with giving me any time off I need to deal with the situation. But that's it. I mean, within the workplace, and it's not a criticism, but my mental health and everyone else's mental health really isn't managed or documented, through the course of a year. I'm never brought in, and my employer's aware of my situation, but I'm rarely brought in. And how you're doing? How have the last 3 months been? Is there anything we could do? Is it asking too much for that sort of to be expected within a workplace to a point?
Well, I mean, I think you're seeing that firsthand with the government. Lockdown was trauma, right? Trauma comes out in people in different times. Trauma that what people have experienced over lockdown. I mean, for me, like I said, it's not going to affect me because I've had trauma in my life to deal with, but there's going to be a lot of people, and it's happening now. It's happening. There was already a crisis before in terms of mental health and stuff. Now, I don't know whether that's because of how we work, whether it's because both people in relationships work because of social media, but there is a massive mental health crisis. Now, I think some workplaces, like my old workplace, if I needed time off for things, I probably would get it. It wouldn't be an issue. I tried never to use anxiety as an excuse. It was more the fact that when things were dumped on me last minute, it would affect my anxiety. And that happened more and more in the last 2 years in my old place, because naturally we're getting stuff chucked down from us, from Sport England, the government are giving us the Sport England, everything's last minute and it doesn't really help, and short-term contracts. But I think that my new place I've gone to, they've got a mental health portal, which is really good. And they've got a health bus that goes around places and talk, which is to all the employees, and you can have a consultation with a nurse, all these sort of things that are really, really good. But again, when you come outside of that into that, you really value it. But when you're in it, you might not value it as much because you haven't experienced other things. I still think, Stuart, that like we work way too hard in this country, massively. We're not around to live in the moment and spend as much time with our children, which means our children are growing up more stressed. Like getting my children in the morning, come on, get ready, we've got to get you to before school club, we've got to start work, you're rushing them up, get up. You're almost causing them stress and anxiety.
I mean, I'm at work earlier, but I mean, because I've been off this week, and it's not a criticism, but my house, I'm not normally here, but I have noticed my house, in the 45 minutes, my daughter sort of gets up around 7 and she goes to breakfast club because my wife has to go off to work early. That 45 minutes is not particularly fun experience for anyone. And it's normally the two of them. It's my wife concerned about not being late, and my daughter just being what a 5.5-year-old is, not particularly rushed, but you can, she picks up on those vibes.
And that's me. And I think, Stuart, that like, one thing we never know is, I know that we never grew up with social media when we were younger. So all these people that are making decisions for young people that have got social media, they've never experienced it. So how can they make those decisions? It's really only the 20-year-olds now that have maybe grown up with it, that when they get a bit older, they can influence. But we grew up in an era when computers were just coming in, emails, etc. Everyone sits behind emails, and I think that there is a massive overstretch that we are like I said, lockdown finishes, government, everyone back to work, everyone, instead of reshaping education, reshaping how we work. I mean, we in England, it's good to be busy. It's good to have that rubber stamp of being like, I was talking to one of my daughter's friends, mums, who I talk to every morning. She was saying it's a badge of honor if you work longer hours, or you do extra things, or you're emailing late at night. It's a badge of honor, and all these things contribute. And actually the real good about being a good human and looking after your own mental health, you know, so therefore you can then look out for other people. You know, we haven't got the space to do that. And like you say, it's just it's just carrying on. And I think if you turn around and say to your work, like, you know, I think this flexible working is a really big thing. I think that can be really good. Now, the place I'm at now, it's flexible as in, you know, you can sort of start early, finish early, but you still got that stigma. Even me in the office today, you know, I started at 7:20 this morning. I left at 3:20 because, again, you talk about coping with anxiety. I'm trying really hard to switch off. I'm trying hard not to get in that cycle I was before. But you want almost workplaces to be like, you know what, if you need to take time off for your mental health, have it off. Like, or if you're feeling stressed, have some time off, work it back. I think the more flexible side of things would really help people out, because 30 years ago, let's not forget, you know, and society has changed for the better, you know, in terms of females and working, but 30 years ago, you'd mainly have the female that would be at home or working part-time. Whereas now, you know, like my wife would say, and I would totally agree with her, females are doing, you know, I hope if anyone listening to this that's transgender, I'm not offending anyone, but females, especially mothers, they are still doing their mum role that was happening 20, 30 years ago. They're just working full-time, or like on top of it, basically.
My wife does an 80-hour week, 40 of them in the office. And we had a very interesting conversation the other day, actually. And my wife, she's amazing. She puts up with me, but she was saying she wants things done. She wants them done right, so she makes sure she does them herself. I do what I can around here. Of course, I'm not useless. I do the gardening, but the majority, and maybe I'm wrong, but the majority, you know, my wife runs this house. She manages me and my daughter, but she has a full-time job as well. And but like you're saying,
I think I would agree with you, sir. That's what happens. My wife knows a lot about finance anyway, so that's why she does all the bills and that sort of stuff. I do other jobs like the washing and emptying the bins and, you know, trying to take the kids to school when I can. But that is a similar sort of thing. And I think it is hard work when you're, you know, every Sunday we have to get our diaries out and match up what we're doing. And I think people in workplaces don't realise the stresses that can cause, because one of my biggest anxieties why I stayed in my old role for so long, right, was because I was scared if I moved jobs, it'd be a 9 to 5 and I wouldn't be around to take my kids to school and all that. But I've sort of refused to let that happen. My two biggest anxieties really is obviously my family, looking after my family and everything, keeping safe there, and losing my Arsenal season ticket. And I know that sounds silly, but they're my two anxieties. And I think if I don't,
and is that can I just and is that Arsenal season ticket? So you're worried about? Let's sort of isolate that anxiety for people. Listen, you are worried about not being able to afford it, if I
lost it, I'd have to wait another 30 years to get on the
because of the waiting list.
Yeah, I mean, me and my wife got in our own names, you know, and it's something we like doing together. And you know, some people might say it's a lot of money, some people might wouldn't, but it's two and a half grand roughly a year. And then when you add the travel on, because we live in the Midlands now, obviously, you know, it's £5 grand a year we have to commit to Arsenal. Which, if you look at it, you know, it's quite.
That's an Oleg Luzhny back in the day.
Exactly. Yeah, that's his wages each week. But I think, like, I get really concerned about that. It's interesting that my anxiety did start to creep into my basketball, which was really strange. You know, I've always been a very capable basketball player. You know, and I've never ever doubted myself and certain things. But there was a period when that anxiety was really bad, around 2017, 18. I was scared to, like, I was almost telling the coach that, don't start me because I'm injured. I'll come off the bench or whatever. And then I was getting worried about making a layup, which I've done in my sleep for 28 years. And I was scared about, I'm not going to be able to make layups and do these things. And I think that, I straight away crushed it, and I was like, no. I'm not having anxiety ruling. So I almost see it like a fight against things. And that's one thing I've always, because listen, when you say you're a fighter, some people always think it's fist, but it's not. And I've always fought against things. And injustice and things that I think right, and and certain things, and that's what I see my battle with anxiety is. I'm not going to allow it to win. I'm going to dictate what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and I think we're running on time here, Luke. So I mean, let's just recap. So what we've discussed today, you've been very, and I think this has been a great podcast because we've got to hear you, and people will be able. I think people actually, I would push people towards the video of this chat in a sense, because it's only Luke sitting there in front of his computer, but you might see from Luke's physical mannerisms, he's been quite, active, even though it is only a Zoom call. And I would sort of go over and I could probably close my eyes and you can hear in your sort of tone of voice that what you're probably going to look like on the screen. And I remember it was your sort of personality that I remember. It hasn't changed from back in sort of 2008. But we've learned how anxiety manifests in you and those catastrophic thoughts. We've learned, how it has displayed itself physically. You've talked about the rash you get on your chest and almost that you've never had quite that panic attack. I mean, I sort of documented that I probably had 2, probably 3. The first time I was sure I was having a heart attack, and that's what sort of you Google it, and people when they have their first panic attack do think they're having a heart attack. And we've sort of talked about sort of coping mechanisms and what's worked best. Like you say, I would tell anyone, if you are able to, if you're at a point where you have a certain sort of core level of physical fitness, I would always recommend getting out for a walk or a run or a game of squash or badminton or basketball, or you can go and have a game of walking football or walking cricket now, but get that air through your lungs. And what I think you've said really well, and I don't know, it's this isn't a we tell people's story on this podcast, and I don't like to push advice too much because I'm not a therapist. I am not a doctor. I have a lived experience. But what I would say, and it's a point that Luke's made, if you are struggling with anxiety, you are entitled to 6 sessions on the NHS, aren't you? If you go and see your doctor, it's like if you want to quit smoking, or if you want, if you go and see your GP, there are 6 sessions available. I assume it's there because it was the same in Kent. You said you were in that sort of Coventry catchment area. When I went, and the doctor said to me, look, you are entitled to 6 sessions they offered me CBT and something else. But that is a piece of advice we can sort of share because it's out there. If you are struggling, I would always say go and see your GP. I wish I'd seen and listened to my GP with my alcoholism earlier. But Luke, it's been wonderful chatting. I think there really is an opening to sort of create for you, certainly, to come on and talk about more specific areas and, maybe a bit more about your personal experience. And I mean, I would suggest, you're talking about your YouTube anxiety diaries. I don't know if you have a little blog, but I mean, it would certainly be great for people to be able to sort of be directed to. People used to enjoy my blog. When I wrote my blog I got to the point where I was writing daily for about 6 months. And I used to have people message me just saying, it's great just to sort of see that daily lived experience. And I would be sort of explaining to people, today was a good day, but, I had this trip. My daughter came home from school and blah, 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 and everything was good until whatever it was. And I'd just write about it, and people would read it for 3 minutes and they'd message and say, Stuart, that's exactly how I feel. And I wasn't able to say why I reacted like I did, but I am able to understand things a bit better. And I think talking to you today, Luke, people will certainly understand your story, but anxiety in general. Before I sign off with the usual rubbish, is there anything you'd like to say before we finish up today, mate?
No, I think it's just that lots of people, everyone has anxiety.
Yeah,
everyone has it. It's a natural form. Flight or fight is a natural thing that will never disappear. But I think that you probably don't realize that your anxiety is out of control until you start getting pains or people start noticing things. But there's nothing wrong with getting some help and advice. And I think the big thing I always say, the fear of what is never as bad as the actual anxiety. The actual outcome is never as bad as what you might catastrophize something to be. Never, ever, ever as bad.
Yeah, 100%. Like Luke's just said, if you're worried about anything, go and see your GP. If you're in a relationship, or you have a partner or a good friend you can trust, if you are struggling with anything in your life, reach out to someone you trust and speak to them. I mean, I would always direct people to the GP. They are wonderful people. Luke Freer, thank you for joining us on Henry Weston's I'll Make the Podcast. Don't forget to, as I said at the start of the podcast, like this video if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on a podcast provider, just drop the show a written review would help. And if you log on to www.buymeacoffee.com/HWOM, you can make a small financial donation to the podcast. Thanks again, Luke. We'll definitely get you back on. It's been an absolute pleasure today. This was an anxiety edition of Henry Weston's I'll Make the Podcast. Cheers, mate.